All right. Well, thank you all so much. This is going to be one of our fireside chats. Danny Ramon with Overhaul. We're going to be talking about freight fraud. And it's something where, especially in my experience and what Danny, we're about to be getting some of his insights, but it has been a growing problem. And while the supply chain has gotten more tech savvy, so have the fraudsters. And so we're going to get some insights. I've had the absolute pleasure getting to talk to Danny before we got to go on. And one of the big things that kind of stuck out to me first was the game has changed. And one of the things I want to ask you first about is the rise in strategic level fraud. So give us a little quick backstory and then tell us what we're seeing over these past 3 years, and we'll get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Thomas. So in the before four times, right, guys, pre-COVID, cargo theft was Smokey and the Bandit style, right? It was you're just stealing the actual tractor trailer from the legitimate driver. But thieves and criminals are not the only ones who recareered themselves during COVID. We've seen a big influx and a big evolution of strategic and fraudulent theft since 2020. Thieves have really realized, criminals have realized, it is scalable, it is less risky, whereas it used to take a minimum of 5 individuals, at least 2 to 5 days to steal one load by, waiting at the origin, following it from origin, waiting for it to be unattended. If it didn't become unattended in the first 200 miles, drive back to origin, wait for the next one. We're talking about 2 to 5 people with planning and everything, 2 to 5 days. Now, from behind a keyboard, you can steal 24 loads a day without ever coming into contact with the evidence, which is the cargo. You can drop ship it to an e-tail website and realize 100% of the profit from sale. Right? And if it's not an e-tail website, you can liquidate it through social media marketplaces. And this key right here, the criminal direct consumer pipeline, is really is part of what's changing the game. And it is changing it in a big way. Because what it's done is it's changed the multi-level liquidation channels that used to be part of organized criminal structures, where everyone along the way is taking a cut. Meaning that pharma, electronics, high-end clothing and shoes, those were the perennial targets, right? Now, post-2020, if you're realizing 100% of the profits from selling those goods, you're not cutting anyone else in, it lowers the bar as to what's an attractive and profitable target for you. So we've seen thefts of toilet paper in 2020, right? And these folks are very much have their finger on the pulse of the US consumer market. They know what sells quickly because now they're not as concerned about value density. The thing that drives attraction to targeting a certain product is how quickly they can sell it. That is how in demand it is. That means how long are they going to be in possession of the evidence. So the quicker they can sell it, the more attractive it is for them to steal. And trust me, these folks know exactly when something goes viral on TikTok, and they're probably going to sell it on TikTok too.
That's what's interesting, because the rise of e-commerce and these various channels now, I can buy off of TikTok. Criminals have also decided it, because that was one of the big things when I started in trucking. That's what we do. HVP rules, 200 miles, no stopping, fuel up, always secure the vehicle at all times if you had a partner. What I'm kind of curious about is that you mentioned this barrier to entry. And so it's almost like, I know some friends who love shoes, and they'll wait for this drop, and they're going to wait for it, and they're going to buy these shoes up. So criminals are operating almost like there's a parallel universe, an upside down world, where they are flipping these products on the black market that beforehand was not accessible.
100%. And anyone who's worked in the Memphis area for a while, show of hands by any chance, the most effective way to launder money in the Memphis area is with shoes. Because you can sell shoes for 150% of the retail value, depending on whether or not it's pre-release, right? So I have a friend who used to be in the Memphis Police Department Cargo Theft Task Force. He now is in the private sector. And he would tell me about a time when there was a year when they were remaking the red and black Jordans. First time since the original Air Jordans came out that they were going to do the same colorway. And the weekend before they were supposed to hit retail shelves, he was out on Beale Street and everybody was wearing them. It's like, well, how did that happen? Well, the folks in Memphis know where those shoes travel through, what warehouses they travel through. And it's not a big leap for them to say, like, hey, I see these trailers sitting still all the time for days at a time, sometimes weeks, especially in 2020 when the supply chain was really clogged. And then they started seeing a lot of those, stories on the news. 2020 was my year at the Thanksgiving table. I could talk about cargo theft and everybody knew what was going on. But they've seen that and they realize that there's opportunity in their own backyard and they're starting to go through that, right? There's not a lot in terms of barrier of entry that it takes to perform cargo theft. Even the most sophisticated types of cargo theft require maybe 3 months of industry experience as a driver, if that. All you're really doing is gathering intelligence and looking at what the procedures are for pickup. What are the policies and procedures for drop off? It's easy to find the loopholes.
So let's talk about the ways these thefts are occurring. One of the other examples we had shoes, the Guy Fieri tequila. That made CBS, that was national headlines. All it took was the guy from Flavortown to bring attention to the cargo theft problem. Thank you, Guy Fieri. I see your restaurant in Sevierville. But when we're looking at the ways these fraudsters are doing it, one of the great things you told me earlier was that we are going through peak season in the supply chain, but for fraudsters, it is peak season as well. And one of these vulnerabilities is the supply chain just doesn't really know where half its crap is going at a given peak time. Talk about some of these ways they're getting it exploited and how for some of these folks who are shippers and customers, just how easy is it to get someone who's busy and next thing you know, I've just lost like half my pallets and I don't find out till later.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Guy Fieri tequila theft is a great example because that one has only been enabled by an MO that's developed in the last 2 or 3 years, right? Alcohol and tobacco, by and large, have been safer, and I don't want to say safe, but safer than general cargo because there's state departments in every state in the country that regulates the sale of liquor and or tobacco, right? So you need paperwork to liquidate it through legitimate channels. It's not always liquidated through legitimate channels, but if you want to, you need paperwork. Now, one of the more common methods of fraudulent theft that's emerged in the last 3 years or so is what I call the SLAB method. That's an acronym, SLAB, shorted load, altered BOL, right? We have the technology now where we can take a picture of a piece of paper on our phones, turn it into a PDF and edit it, and then print it out and it looks just like the original BOL, right? So you can change piece counts, you can change pallet counts, weight, seal number. And if the receiving facility is a big box receiving facility or the kind of receiving facility that receives from dozens, if not hundreds of different shippers, they're not going to have different receiving procedures for every shipper, right? If they accept paper BOL, they're going to take that paper BOL. The dock hand's going to say, well, we get LTLs all the time. I pop the back of this trailer, 2 pallets, not unusual, not raising any flags, not ringing any alarm bells. We'll just intake it, right? And it's not until the receiving accounting department says, hey, this was supposed to have 40 pallets on it, not 2. Then they call the shipper and say, hey, where's the other 38 pallets? By the way, we're back charging you for that. And they go, oh, well, no, we shipped it off the dock with 40 pallets. Here's my BOL. And they're like, no, here's our BOL that shows it delivered with 2. And the criminals have even gone as far as to forge and recreate the stamps, the receiving stamps that show it as proof of delivery. They've delivered there enough times. They know what the employee dock worker's signature looks like when they have to initial it. So they can forge that too. So they will take the stamp that they bought from FedEx Kinko's that looks just like the stamp that's supposed to be at the receiving facility. They'll stamp it on the original BOL, says 40 pallets delivered, signed by John Smith, dock worker number 221, and they'll send that back for proof of delivery. They'll get paid for the load. And it's not until months later sometimes that the victim realizes, hey, that load was short. Hey, how many other shipments did that carrier carry between then and now? 300, 400, 500? We've seen 600, 700 sometimes. Did all of them arrive short? Yeah. How short? 98% short.
So we talked about the evolution of the MO, is that modus operandi?
Operandi.
Operanda. I'm Southern, you'll have to forgive me. But one of the things in the past 3 years that you brought up was the evolution of these various MOs. And one of the things I think was so fascinating was it's almost like a level of escalation. And so it's a form of penetration testing, which beforehand, it took a crew of 3 to 5 guys. One guy gets caught. It's like a bank heist. I'm putting together a crew. Nowadays, in the past 3 years, we have almost like hacker-like precision. Talk about how these MOs start. So for some of these folks who are worried about their supply chain, they're worried about theft, what are some of these early points? Because it almost feels like tendrils trying to find a way to get a foothold to then exploit your operation.
And that's exactly what it is, because criminals are like water. They're going to look for the path of least resistance, right? They want your freight. They're going to get it if they try hard enough. The difference is if yours is harder to get than somebody else's, right? They're only going to work as hard as you make them work to obtain your freight. And if your neighbor's freight is easier to get, they're probably going to go for that, right? So strategic theft is what the industry by and large calls it now. It's also been called We call it theft by fraud, theft by deception, because if you're talking to a police officer who's never dealt with it before, strategic theft doesn't mean anything to them, right? But as an industry, we're calling it strategic theft. It used to be known as fictitious pickup in the industry. And that's because fictitious pickup was the only kind of strategic theft that we dealt with at the time. And this is, 2010, 2011. And that's a very low sophistication, mostly social engineering. I've got a little bit of information that ABC Trucking is supposed to come pick up this load at 5 o'clock. I'm going to show up at 2 o'clock and say that I'm ABC Trucking with a placard on my truck that says I am ABC Trucking, convince the guys to let me go with it, and they will, right? Now everybody knows the $1 million phone call, take a picture of the driver, take a picture of the driver's license. That's the kind of thing that's going to deter a fictitious pickup. But strategic theft now has between 2 and 3 dozen individual MOs that can be mixed, matched, and layered depending on the security posture of the target, right? So if you have a theft, they're going to practice the least sophisticated, least level of effort method of theft that they can that will defeat your security posture. If you then close that one loophole, they have another 2 dozen MOs to mix, match, and layer to provide a path of escalation. If you don't implement a full layered security program with visibility and all the bells and whistles, they know exactly what their next step is going to be. And they're going to continue to pursue until you're no longer the lowest hanging fruit.
Let's talk about that. I don't want to be the lowest hanging fruit. It's like outrunning a bear. I just need to be faster than the other guy.
Correct.
And so when we're looking at strategies to make it to where I am more fortified, it's almost like cybersecurity now. You almost have to like penetration test your own company and find out Bob and click the link he shouldn't have. But talk about that, because for a lot of the listeners, I'm sure I want to impress my boss and I want to be harder to detect. What are some of these layers? What are some of these solutions you're starting to see as you're trying to evolve this constant arms race?
Yeah, the number one tool in our arsenal is visibility. You can't fix a problem that you don't know that you have. I think a great example of this is the fact that the Corca bill that's currently going through Congress that's going to address cargo theft as well. It's organized retail crime. They're lumping in cargo theft because a lack of visibility means that a lot of cargo theft goes unrecognized and ends up being classified as retail crime, right? Because if the last time that a thorough piece count inventory is taken is at the shipper, and the next time a thorough piece count inventory is taken is at the point of retail sale, if it goes missing somewhere in between there, it's not discovered until the point of retail sale, that's where the loss is going to be recorded. If you don't have visibility into your supply chain to know that it might have been leakage somewhere else along the way, or pilferaged, or a double brokering scam, or a shorted load, altered BOL, you don't even know that you have a problem.
So what do I put? I'm thinking like air tags or something. What are some of the visibility metrics? I know right now, it's a great time to be alive if you want cameras, IoT devices, sensors, APIs, platforms. Talk about kind of like how overall helps as well. Give us some ideas about what are the ways these folks are using the technology to try and shine a light in this middle area where this loss likes to occur.
Right. So in addition to, real-time compliance monitoring, making sure you know where your stuff is and what condition it's in, knowing who you're doing business with is probably the biggest step you can take. There is no magic bullet. There is no one step. But the biggest step you can take to deterring fraudulent theft in your network is know who you're doing business with. A lot of people like to say trust but verify. I say verify and then trust. So there's a lot of carrier validation platforms out there. We have one that I like a lot more. It's the only one to my knowledge that incorporates what we call two-factor authentication, where it's not just the information packet that's submitted that gets verified and validated, but it's also the physical entities that show up at your shipping location that get verified and validated, as well as using automatic image recognition to make sure that any red flags that are present can be brought to your attention and investigated. Things like magnetic placards and zip-tied license plates, things like recently repainted or remarked trailers and tractors, rivets on the back of the trailer doors, nuts and bolts on the back of trailer doors instead of rivets, things like this that indicate a higher risk level. All of these things are being quantified and then displayed to the end user saying, hey, this adds 15 points of risk on a 100-point scale. This one adds 5. This one adds 80. And it gives you a priority list of what you need to vet and verify before you actually trust that particular entity that's at your door.
So that's one of the things, especially with the power of AI and computer vision now, we've talked about a lot of the ability to recognize vehicles, decals, and VINs. So you're saying one of the great ways is you create a matrix that every time a carrier comes, maybe I'm just going to put a big old tent post with some cameras, and I'm going to look for those little indicators, and that's going to create a risk profile for every truck. And that's kind of like the first step is to start litmus testing each person to try to identify who's the highest likelihood and then come up with a game plan.
Exactly. And in addition to, nipping in the bud the problem of illicit double brokering, right? If you get a carrier packet that says carrier ABC is going to show up and then carrier DEF shows up instead, a lot of times if there's no checks in place, it just goes out the door. Because again, this is something I say all the time. I haven't said it yet today, but there's a lot of things that happen in the supply chain industry that are common and legal, but are not at all secure. Double brokering is one of those, right? There's ways that it happens where everything's above board and that's fine. But if you don't want your shipment to be brokered, don't issue your shipment to a carrier that has broker authority. Chances are they're going to try because it'll save them money, right? But the bigger danger is the illicit double brokering, the double brokering you don't know about. And that makes it really difficult to investigate and to recover in the event of a loss.
So let's say I get robbed. You had a great example of how LA has a task force designed to it. One of the big questions I run into is, who do I talk to? Because if I'm an interstate carrier in Arkansas and my truck gets stolen, it ends up in New York, it's like a game of hot potato. And then some people say Homeland Security even. So what are some steps if it does occur? I know we have a little bit of time left. What are some of the steps to try to help people get pointed in the right direction? Who do you even call if it happens?
Don't call 911, please, because you're going to be put in line. 911's great, right? But rightfully so, you're going to be put in line behind all of the violent crimes and behind all of the property crimes that have a hot lead, right? Now, if you've got visibility installed, you do have a hot lead. But you need to get to the cargo theft task force, which unfortunately there's only 6 in the country now. Or you need to get to the auto theft task force or the detective who handles auto theft, right? It's tough, especially at the times of day that cargo theft usually happens. If you don't have that network already built, you're going to have to wait until the next business day. And that's incredibly frustrating. My senior law enforcement liaison at Overhaul, John Cannon, loves to say, you need to dig your well before you're thirsty, right? Make sure you've got all those things in place already. A great segue, a great first step is wherever your origin locations are, invite the local patrol officers in. Show them where your coffee machine is. Invite the detectives in. Maybe hold a quarterly meeting, just what you're seeing from an industry perspective so that local law enforcement can be plugged into what you're seeing and know what the problems are. That way, if you have to contact them about a strategic theft, it's not Greek to them. They know what you're talking about, right? And then you also have a local contact that can help you get other contacts in other jurisdictions. It's not guaranteed. We've got a huge network of law enforcement contacts at Overall, largely because of John Cannon and Bobby Motley, who between the two of them have a combined 80 years of cargo theft law enforcement experience. So they are walking Rolodexes, and I'm lucky that myself and my team get to learn from them. But if you don't already have that network, start building it now. Attend all of the trade shows. This is the first time I've been to this one, and most of my people from the security side are currently in Monrovia, California, at the CargoNet conference. This is a great conference. That's a great conference. They're different focuses, right? So attend the TAPA conferences. That's a great place to get law enforcement contacts and network. Attend the SWTSC conference in Dallas. I think it happens every March. That's a great place to make law enforcement contacts because that one provides continuing education credits to law enforcement. So it is heavily attended by law enforcement. But start building that network yesterday.
Final thoughts. Got a little bit of time left. Start local, get involved, helps out. Some states have memorandum of understanding. Start with your local person. They can point you in the right direction. Looking ahead, got about a minute left. Anything across the radar as we keep talking about those MOs changing? Is there anything on the bleeding edge folks should think about?
Something's happening right now that we don't know about, folks. The last 3 years, the last 3 holiday seasons, these organized strategic criminals have come up with a new MO or a new mix-match layer of their existing MOs to practice during this busy shipping season because they know that the corners are being cut from October to the end of December. And they know that the first corner to be cut is going to be security, right? They know that they're not filling out as many forms when they go to pick up a load. They're not taking as many pictures. They're not fielding as many, seal verification calls as they do the rest of the year. And so for the past 3 years, we've seen them come up with a new method. Shorted load, altered BOL was the one that happened 2 years ago that by and large, the industry is not going to find out about until January, probably late January. One of them's happening right now. I can guarantee it. So make sure you know who you're doing business with and where all your stuff is and in what condition it's in.
Stay vigilant. Danny, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your thoughts as well. And we'll definitely catch up again soon.
Thank you, Thomas.
Yes, sir.